LinkedIn presents.
In today's world, we take the idea of leading with personal story for granted. I, of course, do it on the show. It's kind of my thing. But people across media and those in the public eye, even brands and companies, know that sharing a story and being vulnerable leads to more trust, more authenticity, more affinity. And it just makes us feel better. And there's actual data showing that stories can heal us. It wasn't always this way. And when it comes to mental health and neurodivergence at work, it certainly isn't that way across the board. I'm Aarons-Mele, and this is The Anxious Achiever, the show that looks at the intersection of mental health and work, and how we can all do both better.
The LinkedIn Podcast Network is sponsored by TIAA. TIAA makes you a retirement promise. A promise of a guaranteed retirement paycheck for life. Learn more at TIAA.org/promises pay off.
Today's guest is someone who is a well-credentialed, respected doctor who recently became TikTok famous in his 70s. And it was authentic, because Dr. Ned Hallowell is a bit of an original influencer. He's been sharing his personal struggles publicly before it was cool to do so, for sure. Dr. Hallowell has ADHD and an ACEs score of 8, which is a measure of adverse childhood experiences that someone has faced. We've talked about it on the show before. Hallowell's work centers around counseling people of all ages with ADD. He views his role as helping patients unwrap the gifts of neurodivergence. And in fact, he thinks that the phrase deficit disorder is the wrong phrase, which we'll get into. But I started the conversation by asking why he felt comfortable in sharing his personal story in the first place.
You know, it's in my DNA. I come from a family where we tell the truth, for better or for worse. And that's why we're kind of a rambunctious group of people. But I also knew that there's nothing to be ashamed of who I am. Yes, there are difficulties that go with it, but there are also pronounced strengths. And if I were to hide that, I'd tarnish some of the strengths as well. And yes, I wanted to set people free from this horrible prison of stigma that society puts them in. And it's not just what I've got, ADD and dyslexia, it's all differences when it comes to the brain, from schizophrenia to bipolar to depression to you name them. And in fact, if you look at highly creative, high-achieving people, it's hard to find anyone who doesn't have one or another of the conditions we talk about. So, I wanted to be outspoken. And my dad was bipolar, and it was hush-hush in my family. The people who bought into the stigma we weren't supposed to talk about my father being crazy. And yet he was a wonderful man, and he taught public school in New Hampshire for the last 30 years of his life, thanks to lithium. He was able to do that. And when he died, buses full of teachers came down for his services. We are a force in this world. And I would say we are the cutting edge force. We're the innovators, the inventors, the people who make things happen. Most entrepreneurs have this condition. Yeah. And if you're in business and you don't welcome people who are different, you're costing yourself. Because they're the people who will save your bacon. They're the people who will think of a new kind of bacon. We're the innovators and outside the box thinkers. And no, we're not going to be on time. We're not going to do exactly what we're told. We're going to be a little disruptive but so what? What we give is so much greater than what we cost you.
Yes. Could you just quickly give us an overview of what the brain looks like on ADHD? What at a high level is happening in an ADHD brain that doesn't happen in a neurotypical brain?
Well, the short answer to that is we don't know. I mean, we talk as if we did know because we are aware of some differences, but we haven't got the whole thing mapped out, neurochemically, anatomically, even genetically. But we do know it's a biologically based condition. When I learned about this in 1981, we didn't even know that. And people would take me to task and say, this sounds like a made-up excuse for kids who wants to get out of doing homework. It was a raging debate until the 1990s when Aarons-Mele did his landmark study that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, showing there's a clear biological difference between the two. As to what's going on in the brain, well, the way I describe it in very lay terms, our brain is like a Ferrari engine, powerful, powerful engine with bicycle brakes. So we have this tremendous power, our greatest power. We have this colossal imagination. And we don't know how big it is because we've always had it.
Right.
We don't realize that other people don't. We grow up, we live, our mind is on fire all the time, just generating new ideas, new thoughts, new images, new plans. It just flooded with stimuli. And the hard part is organizing it, breaking it down, putting on the brakes. So colossal imagination with poor braking power, which is we live in a relative state of disinhibition. That allows us or makes us very inappropriate at times. We are not good at being appropriate, a word that I can't stand. We tend to say whatever's on our mind. But also, that is the root, and think about this for a minute, that's the root of creativity.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not somewhat impulsive, if you're not disinhibited, you're not going to come up with new ideas. Your unconscious will forbid them. You'll cast them aside. Oh, no, that's too weird. That's too wacko. That's out of it. Well, that's where we are. We get flooded with weird, wacko things, and some of those turn out to be valuable. Most of them are useless, so we have to throw them away. But our disinhibition, while it can get us into trouble, if you tell the traffic cop he looks like Elmer Fudd, you're going to get into trouble, whether he does or not. But if you draw a cartoon of Elmer Fudd that gets you in cartoons and magazines, you make a living doing it. So
Right.
Everything in the world of ADD is a blessing and a curse. The people say distractibility is such a curse. Well, what is curiosity but a form of distractibility? We hear something over there, we want to know what it is. The good little doobie will say, no, I've got to pay attention to my lesson, and he won't go off task. But me, I'm out the window, figuratively, and when I'm finding out what that noise is, which is to say they both can be problematic, they both can be assets. So what I do with my patients and my books is try to help people turn this condition mostly into an asset.
Yes.
Minimize the damage it does and maximize the gift it provides. So I tell folks, I don't treat disorders or disabilities. I help people unwrap gifts.
Talk a little bit about the demon, the DMN, and the TPN, and how that works in a neurotypical brain versus an ADD brain.
Yeah, this is new science coming, a lot of it out of MIT. And thanks to fMRI, you can watch the brain as it's thinking, functional MRI. We found that when you're engaged in a task, when you're baking a cake or writing a letter or doing something that requires creative engagement, 4 different regions of the brain light up. And together, that's called the task positive network, the TPN. Mm-hmm. And that's when you're at your best. That's when we're grooving. We're in flow, to use Csikszentmihalyi's term. You're one with the task. Can't separate the dancer from the dance kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. It's harmonious. It's when we do our best work, when we're in the TPN. Unfortunately, it can't last forever. We're not machines. When it ends, the TPN shuts down. And the old teaching was the brain kind of takes a rest. Well, the fact is the brain never takes a rest. So what lights up instead of the TPN is called the default mode network, the DMN, which I call the demon for the following reason. In people with ADD, our switching station is not operating the way it does in other people. So what we do under the spell of the DMN, our imagination turns evil, turns wicked, turns against us. And this DMN becomes a demon. And we just pour this stream of horrible, negative invective all over us. You're stupid, you're boring, you're ugly, you're never going to get anything done, you're pretentious. You just name the adjective that's bad, and we lather ourselves with it. And this can go on for, quite a while.
How does the demon function in a non-AD, in a neurotypical brain? Is it the one that gives us daydreaming and resting and create?
You don't go into the kind of trance that we go into.
Yeah.
And the reason we allow ourselves to go into that trance, I mean, we do have control over it, and I'll tell you what it is in a second. But the reason we do get captivated by the DMN is we're always looking for stimulation. That's our constant desire. We crave stimulation. Well, pain is the most stimulating stimulus that there is.
Mm-hmm.
First physical pain, then mental pain. And the DMN provides mental anguish, horrible pain. But that captivates us. You see, you don't say she was riveted in contentment. Contentment is too bland. But you do say she was riveted in pain, agony, worry,
Conflict.
As long as it's painful, it's stimulating and much more captivating than contentment is. Contentment is too bland. So that's why we put up with it. That's why we indeed allow it to continue, because at any given moment, we could stop it. And most people don't realize that, and they turn to medication. Medication doesn't touch it unless you anesthetize yourself. The medication is not going to have an impact. And typically they get put on SSRIs, which don't do much except take away your libido, which is a bad side effect. Instead, what you should do, and it's not easy, but it's absolutely a skill you can learn how to change the channel. Learn how to switch from the DMN's torture to something else that's stimulating enough to pull you out of the DMN. So it can't be just, turn on a boring TV show. It's got to be a TV show you really want to watch.
Yes.
Or it's got to be music that's really loud that you love. Jumping off bungee jumping. It's got to be something that really gets your adrenaline going. And it can't be just ordinary, change the subject. See, what you should have in your brain is a Rolodex of things that you can turn to at those moments. Because if you do it, if you switch your attention, let's say you're someone who loves to exercise, so you go for a vigorous run. When you're running, the DMN goes away.
Yeah.
You're on to something else. Unfortunately, of all the symptoms of this condition in adults, this is by far the most painful one. And most people don't even know about it, let alone what to do about it. What ends up happening de facto is they complain about, how bad they feel, and so they get put on an antidepressant. Or someone says maybe it's anxiety, so they get put on anxiolytic. I mean, or some of their productions are so weird, they get put on an antipsychotic medication, none of which they need, and all of which carry side effects that are not nice, and so you're ending up giving yourself a treatment that not only doesn't work, but that is bad for you, and you're not addressing the underlying issue. I mean, this is one of those times when knowledge is the key, and the remedy is free, doesn't cost a nickel. All you need to know is to know what to do. And I'm telling you, but remember, the flip side of that, in this condition, there's always a flip side. Every negative has a positive, every positive has a negative. So the positive side of the DMN is the TPN,
right?
Is creative thinking. And for reasons we don't understand, is our imagination is much bigger than the average imagination. And that in and of itself is a blessing and a curse. I mean, we are the world's worst, or best, however you want to, what adjective, warriors. We are usually, I wrote a whole book about worry because I'm such a worrier. Why do we worry so much? Because it's stimulating.
Yes.
And we're good at coming up with all kinds of things to worry about because we tend to be smart and creative. It takes a lot of intelligence and creativity to dream up all the crap we worry about, because most of it is off the wall, unrealistic, never going to happen. But we well, what if? What if? We go into what I call the infinite web of what if.
The infinite web. Is this why a lot of people with ADD get stuck on the follow through?
Oh, yeah.
Like why is follow through so hard?
When the stimulation wears off.
Aha.
That's when, and that's why we're serial lovers. We go from one girlfriend to the next or one boyfriend to the next, because the minute you've had the thrill of the first encounter, and, it's not that amazing feeling you get when you're first falling in love or whatever you want to call it. When that's over, we tend to, bring on another one. And if you're talking about food at a restaurant, that's not so bad. But when you're talking about relationships, that's not so good.
Well, or projects at work. I mean, the biggest complaint, bar none, I get from people who manage people who have ADHD or who are is they don't follow through. They don't check their email. They don't respond to email. I can never pin them down, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, but you can learn that. Like I've written 23 books, and a book requires a lot of follow through and a lot of stick to itiveness. And I've learned how to do it. And by the way, this is often overlooked, but the reason I've worked so hard at it and learned how to do it is because I like it so much. People think, oh, you're so disciplined. No, I'm the laziest guy in the world. You can't find anyone who's lazier than I am. So it's not a matter of you're so disciplined. It's that I love the feeling of writing a good sentence. Nothing really turns me on as much as that. Now, that may sound weird, but it's true. I get a tremendous glow when I put together a whole book. That's my joy. That's my, next to my family, that's what I love. And so I'm willing to work hard and give up other things in order to do that, in order to achieve that blissful state. And there's a lot of suffering along the way. By the way, don't become a writer. If you can possibly stop it, don't do it.
No.
It's a horrible
It's
way.
awful.
It's so amazing. I mean, you might as well sign up to be a ditch digger. You have more fun. I mean, it's not a matter of discipline and hard work and other. By the way, most people who work really hard, so because they want to, unless they're impoverished and have to do anything to get money. I mean, surgeons, for example, people admire them. They're so hardworking. They love being in the OR. They'd rather do that than anything.
But here's the thing. I love my work. Even the most joyous job, you got to respond to the emails. You got to fill in your expense report. So how do you, even you personally, or how do you outsource that? Do you just suck it up?
In the 6th grade, I had a math teacher who was an absolute stickler for little tiny details. And so he had virtually a whole manual on the correct format to hand in your homework, where the decimal point was, what was supposed to be circled, what's supposed to be in a box. And he did it just so we'd learn attention to detail. And the answers we put down didn't matter. That was another grade. But you got graded on your ability to comply with every single one of these stupid, we all knew they were stupid, details. And he made a game out of it. Because if you got it all right, he'd put on this big act of, oh, this is terrible. I've got to make it harder. You really need. And we'd all giggle and laugh. And so we were motivated. We were into it. We were on that. And basically, I think of it as a cognitive muscle. I developed that muscle in 6th grade. And it got me through medical school. It gets me through the tedium of the forms that I still have to fill out. And thank God, Mr. Goodhue was his name. He taught me how to do that because it does not come naturally to me at all. The minute it's tinged with boring, we're out.
Well, or it's tinged with you have to. The rebellion.
Both of those, exactly.
The FU muscle comes in. It's like, you're not going to tell me to do my expense report.
Absolutely. If you want us to do something, tell us not to do it. So, yeah, it's against the grain, but I've learned how to do it.
The LinkedIn Podcast Network is sponsored by TIAA. In the last 100 years, we've seen financial markets swing, new currencies come and go, decades of savings lost in days, all showing that a retirement plan without a guarantee, quite simply, isn't enough. So more than a retirement plan, TIAA makes you a retirement promise. A promise of a guaranteed retirement paycheck for life. A promise that pays off. Learn more at TIAA.org/promisespayoff.
Hi, I'm DC Marshall.
Hi, I'm Mita Malik.
We are the co-host of the Brown Table Talk podcast, where we discuss how to help women of color thrive in their workplaces.
And we invite allies to join us to help women of color win at work. We have a seat waiting for you. Subscribe to Brown Table Talk wherever you enjoy podcasts.
One of the things that I want to shift, because I think it will be so instructive for our audience, whether they have ADD or not, is we all feel like we have it. It's kind of a joke. I was reflecting this morning on my day, trying to field calls from my mom's nursing home, check my Slack, check my email, actually try to get an article in. My daughter's upstairs because school's out. My brain couldn't rest. I couldn't stay on task. The TPN was not firing. You actually call this vast. And it actually explains why a lot of us, especially those of us trapped in highly digital worlds, feel like we have ADD. Do we?
Depends how you define ADD.
Yeah.
And by the DSM-5 definition, no, you don't. But practically speaking, the treatments we have for ADD minus medication would be very effective for you. Exercise, structure, coaching, having a creative outlet, pursuing your interests and not just doing what you have to do, quote unquote. So living your life as if you had ADD will help you. And so whether to call you ADD or not is sort of a moot point. But like I said, by the DSM definition, you don't have it. I mean, in order to have it, it's various people talk about it and make it so complicated. In the DSM, there are two banks of symptoms, 9 symptoms related to inattention and 9 symptoms related to impulsivity and hyperactivity. In order to qualify the diagnosis, you have to have 6 out of 9 on either axis. And then there's some other qualifiers. They have to be impairing in some way. They have to have occurred before a certain age. But it's very objective. You either have it or you don't. People say it's so wishy. It's not wishy-washy. There's the definition. You either have it or you don't. Now, I see a lot of people, because I mainly see very high-functioning people, who don't qualify for that diagnosis, but they are tremendously helped by the interventions that I can prescribe for them. So I say they have pseudo-ADD, or what I'd really like to say, which I do say in the book, they have what I call VAST,
Yes.
which is variable attention stimulus trait. Not disorder, but trait.
Trait.
Depending how you manage it, it's either an asset or a liability, and it's usually a little bit of both. So my job is to turn it as much into an asset as I can and as little of a liability as possible. So variable, that's everything in our world is variable. Attention, one of the main ones, stimulus, another main one, and then trait. Vast, and I call it vast because it is vast. This condition takes in all of you, much more than the little tiny definition in the DSM. It takes in everything. Everything you do in life except sleep improves with focus. It reduces anxiety. It elevates you out of depression. It makes you a lot easier to get intimate with. It makes you a lot easier to manage. Everything gets better when you can focus.
But this is the toxic A-bomb of focus.
Is that your daughter?
Oh, well, she's much older now, but that's when she was a little baby.
That's yours?
Yeah.
She is so adorable.
I know,
What's her name?
Josephine. She's 9 now.
How many kids do you have?
I have 3 kids.
Great, good for you. So do I. How old are they?
15, 13, and 9.
Oh, similar. Mine are 35, 32, and 29.
Oh, wow. So same thing.
Yeah, exactly. My oldest is a daughter. They all work in variation of marketing. She is a executive with the National Football League. So she makes commercials for the Super Bowl, that kind of thing. Yeah, all 3 of them have ADHD. They all take medication, and they all see it as an asset. That's the problem. And executives, if your audience is a lot of executives, please immediately get my book, ADHD 2.0, realize how powerful an asset this condition could be, and then go out and hire them. Stop excluding them. Just the opposite. You want as many of those people as you can have. And then you can hire bean counters to ride herd on.
That's right.
We do need some organizers, but we need us there too to come up with the ideas. And then you get your bean counters who actually like counting beans. They help them stay on track. But don't do what happens so often. The minute someone sees on a resume anything that smacks of a cognitive or emotional difference, you're out of there, because we have such horrible, ignorant stigma against the most talented segment of the population.
So much.
And if you include addiction, if you go into an AA meeting, everyone there is incredibly talented. And, it's just such a colossal waste of talent how we exclude, disparage, scorn people with addiction.
Let's go back to work, because I actually have a question. I showed you the phone because I'm of 2 minds. Working in the digital realm can be very stimulating for a high energy brain. But it also encourages jumping around and lack of focus. It's like living your life with too many tabs open at the same time. Everyone I know feels like they're living their life with too many tabs on their browser open.
Right.
But I don't think any of us either, we don't want to go back to a life where we're just by ourselves with a piece of paper.
No.
But we're a little trapped by the fact that we have too many tabs open at the same time.
Right. So back to the Greeks, learn the golden mean, learn moderation. And that's a word that we're allergic to.
Yes.
With me anyway, it's all or nothing. I go shopping, I come back with 20 times with my wife said, don't go shopping.
My husband cannot go to Costco. He should be barred from Costco.
Me too. Come up, shopping cart loaded, you get a new sofa or a new, my wife actually believes I have a shopping addiction.
Wow.
She thinks Amazon and I are in trouble.
Because Amazon has also erased any friction for you to buy whatever you want. That's part of it too.
Oh, totally. Just, I want that. I want Hallowell, one of those. I'll have 6 of those. And I try to rein it in, but I get a little dopamine squirt every time I push that little button.
A lot of us are allergic to moderation, not just people who have ADD. Like, what is the workplace? What are managers going to do now? Because they are torn in many places, feeling unable to focus. They are managing a neurodivergent workforce. They're managing people who have VAST. Mm-hmm. Is it as simple as trying to rigidly bring focus back into our days? Is it about everyone needs to learn skills?
Well, yes, because lack of focus is so pandemic. But one core principle that they should use more is match the person with the job. So what you want to make sure everyone is doing, given the tasks you have in your workplace, are they working in that area 3 circles? One circle is everything you're good at. Second circle is everything you really like to do. And the third circle is everything someone will pay you to do or what advances the mission. Right. So everybody ought to be spending their time at work in the overlap of those 3 spheres, something they're good at, they like to do that advances the mission. And that's when people work at their best. It's intrinsically motivating to do something well. It just is. With something about us, we like doing things well and we don't like effing up, So if managers would do more of that and be less attuned to the bottom line and are we making our quota and all that kind of pressures that managers are under and just trust the process. If you have a whole bunch of people who are working in that, what I call their sweet spot, you will get maximum productivity, guaranteed.
Let me ask you a question about being a leader with ADD. When you work with people who manage other people who have significant responsibilities, whether they're entrepreneurs or they work within an organizational system, what are the skills that they need to really think about and master?
At the top of the list, and this is based on, a lot of highly successful entrepreneurs have ADD, so I've got to meet them. At the top of the list is the ability to delegate. Hire an assistant who can do what you can't do. Yeah. Now, some people are so egoistic that they're threatened by people who can do what they can't do, so they don't hire and they perish. Mm-hmm. But the ones who are secure enough to hire people who can do what they can't do, they thrive. And the more you can give credit to the other people, the better you will do. So one of the keys to being a great leader is not being a narcissist, not being unable to give credit to other people. It is so obvious, but some people just can't do it. Hire people who can do what you can't do.
Right.
Duh. I mean,
Duh.
If there's a stumbling block that's pretty easily corrected, that would be the one. You can't increase your IQ. You can't increase your skill set. You can. It takes a long time. You can't change your fundamental personality from introvert to extrovert. But you can learn how to delegate. And it's just a matter of overcoming whatever fears you have about other people getting more attention than you get.
I mean, leadership gets tough when it stops being fun.
Right.
And I would imagine for a novelty-seeking brain, that can be especially hard.
Well, that's when you need to have a rich store of things that engage you. If you look forward to doing the Times crossword, it comes out every day. So you've always got a playpen there. Or if you look forward to, if you have a favorite TV show, or if you have a favorite bar you go to after work, but watch out for that. If you have places where you can reliably get pleasure, then the part of work that you don't like, it's a lot easier to do because you're looking forward to the reward. I mean, and it works. We do respond to rewards. By the way, Another important management cue and also parenting cue, punishment doesn't work. Rewards do work. And, the best example of that is our penal system. We are costing ourselves so much more money than we need to. In Europe, they've learned, we do better with rehabilitation. Well, we're still stuck in our caveman mentality. We are there, lock them up and throw away the key. It's counterproductive. And the rehabilitative model is cheaper. And, the outcome is obviously preferable.
I have one more question about management. You write, and it seems to be true, that people who manage ADD can be a little bit irritable. They can be impulsive and sometimes inappropriate. I hate that word too.
Yeah.
And that can get in the way of managing people, of giving feedback, right? Of creating the socio-emotional landscape of a team. What are some skills that you've seen be successful? I have a Post-it that says "Think before you talk" on my desk. That works for me.
Yeah. It is the hardest tendency we have to overcome.
Yeah.
We have this hair trigger tongue. It's out. First of all, know that about yourself. Try to ride herd on it. I tell you stories about me blurting things out. I really have to depend upon the kindness of strangers. I can say completely inappropriate things. Fortunately, I've learned how to bring that under control somewhat. But from the wider picture, what I have to give is so much greater than what I cost the world with my inappropriate remarks.
That's right.
That I've made peace with that. I can live with it. Okay, world, I'm gonna say some things that are disruptive and inappropriate, and you'll allow me that, because what I do on the other side of the ledger is so much greater. And I think you want to remind yourself of that, because we as a group tend to have low self-esteem. We are very hard graders of ourselves. In fact, I'm working on a book now. It's not about ADD, but it's one that most ADD people should read. It's called "You're Better Than You Think You Are."
Oh.
And most of us are better than we think we are.
Most of us, and we have such harsh inner critics who are
Exactly.
excited to tell us how terrible we are all the time.
Exactly. And we believe that harsh inner critic, and we just don't believe the people who say good things. Either they're just kissing up to us, or they're just trying to please us, or we pay them to say that. They always have some cynical way of dismissing it. Well, the fact is, they mean it. You've got a lovely soul. You're a generous person. You're a smart cookie. We push those away as if they were somehow toxic. And in fact, we need them tremendously. I use the verb metabolize. You want to be able to metabolize praise just like you do food. So you can break it down and have it spread throughout your bloodstream and feed your every cell.
I love that. Last question. We've talked a little bit about worry. I want to talk a little bit about ADHD and anxiety, which in my experience go together like peanut butter and jelly.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true? And if so, is there a different way that someone with ADD might want to think about it?
Well, let me explain to you, because there's a very important intersection of depression, anxiety, and ADD.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens, usually, if you go for an evaluation, the depression and the anxiety, because they're impossible to miss, get identified and treated, and the underlying ADD, which is driving it all, gets overlooked completely. If you turn it on its head and you identify the ADD, untreated ADD is anxiogenic. If you feel relatively out of control all the time, you're going to be anxious. If you're walking around worried about, how am I going to screw up next? What am I going to be late for next? Who's going to call me out next? How am I going to make a fool of myself next? What PC rule am I going to violate without knowing I'm violating it? You're walking around in a sea of anxiety.
Yes.
It's not a true anxiety disorder, but it's a cloud of anxiety that your untreated ADD creates. And the same thing with so-called depression. It's not really depression. It's underachievement, because untreated ADD leads you to underachieve. You have a very inconsistent pattern. The minute you're thriving, the next minute you're spacing out, and you could be doing a lot better. Unexplained underachievement is one of the hallmark signs of adult ADD.
Yep.
So if you treat the ADD, let's say you get put on Adderall, you focus better because you're in more control, your anxiety goes down, and your achievement goes up. So what it looked like depression goes away. Essentially, you treat the anxiety and depression by treating the ADD, and you don't need antidepressants or anxiolytics at all.
That makes a lot of sense.
Well, that's what you get having done this for 40 years, I've seen a few things.
You've seen a few things. Okay, my very last question is about worry. Some of us are champion worriers. We could medal in the Olympics. You're a champion worrier. What is your go-to when the worrying kicks in? What's your go-to skill?
All right. I have a 3-step process that I've learned the hard way, which is over the years. The first rule, and by far the most important, this is the golden rule of worry. Never worry alone. Connect with another person. The instant you do that, the worry will come down, whether you solve the problem or not. If someone joins you in brainstorming, it changes from worrying to problem solving. Okay, step 2. Once you have a team, get the facts. Usually, toxic worry, remember there's a good form of worry, but toxic worry is rooted in wrong information or lack of information or both.
Mm-hmm.
And so you want to get enough facts that you can counter those 2 obstacles, pitfalls. And then finally, number 3, make a plan. Whether the plan works or not doesn't matter. When you have a plan, you feel more in control. And that's one of the variables that creates worry. If you feel out of control, you worry. If you have control, you don't. And so just having a plan reduces worry. And then if the plan isn't working out, you change the plan. And that's what life is. It's a long process of changing plans because nothing works forever. There's a step 4, but I don't include that usually because it's so advanced. But if you are an advanced person, you can get to step 4.
I'm advanced. Tell me.
Step 4 is let it go.
That's too hard.
Exactly.
Oh, Dr. Hallowell, thank you so much.
Oh, it's a real pleasure, and I hope all this has made sense.
That's it for this episode of The Anxious Achiever. The show is produced and edited by Mary Dew with production support and sound engineering by Nick Krinko. If you like what you heard, head to your favorite podcast app. Leave us a review. It really matters, and we appreciate the time and effort it takes. And if you don't subscribe or follow the show already, now's the time. And let us know what you'd like to hear more of. I get some of my best ideas from my listeners, so find me on LinkedIn, send me a message. You can find my weekly newsletter there as well. A big thanks to LinkedIn and all the listeners out there and our guests in the Anxious Achiever world. Until next time.